Hey folks, welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. This is Eric, your ambassador of common sense, and today I'm back with
Dan, the ambassador of nonsense. Hello everybody. Back from a nice cruise, taking a break there.
Long break.
Yeah, well, the cruise was only a week, but then we came back and my wife got this, I don't know whether it was a flu or some kind of infection or what, but she spent like 6 days, 24 hours a day. She did not sleep more than, like a few minutes of dozing at a time because she was constantly coughing. So
my wife got the flu too.
Yeah, was it a flu? Was it? I don't even know if it was a flu that my wife got.
She did have the flu. She did confirm the flu, and I said, "Well, okay, go upstairs to bed. Quit bugging me."
Yeah, my wife tested negative for the flu twice, so could have still been.
Oh well, people get sick.
Yeah. Anyway, so now I'm back, and.
Jason and I covered. What did we cover? We did a bit on abortion, and then we. I don't even remember what we talked about. Oh well.
Must not have been that memorable.
Must not have been that important. And we've given him a new title.
Oh really?
The ambassador of common nonsense.
Common nonsense.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. That's I guess that works.
Okay, we're going to talk about other religions today. And you would think that this is all coming from what the Pope recently said, but I will state first that we were going to do a podcast eventually about this. And what it stemmed from was that a family member has joined a little cult, and in the way he saw Catholics was that we worship like false gods, like we worship the scapular, things like that, and pray to the dead, things like that. And he had some really stringent ways of dealing with anything that was Catholic, in that, you can't come into my house with wearing a scapular because that's demonic, and it's not allowed to be around me, or I don't know. But it just got me to thinking, okay, let's say I really thought that other religious items are actually demonic, and what should be our response to things like that. And so I had planned to do a podcast, and I'm not even sure what to call it yet, but that was the idea. And then Pope Francis recently had another little blunder, and so we'll start with that.
Yeah, he could, because it kind of introduces the broader question of as Catholics, how should we view other religions? If a religion is false, for example, in the sense that it doesn't acknowledge and worship what we think of as the one true God, we use that phrase.
Right.
But another religion, for example, might have a concept of a single deity, for example, but it might be in a sense monotheistic, but doesn't recognize that God as having all the attributes of our God. Well, okay, so in a certain sense, it's not the one true God, but is every religion that fails to acknowledge the one true God necessarily demonic? And if they are or are not, if they're not demonic in that case, how do we view them and how do we relate to them? And then, that also begs the more specific questions in our interaction with people, in the kinds of, say, rules we set up in our house. How far do you take it? Is every symbol that's associated with any religion other than Christianity something that you should just put up a barrier and exclude from your house? If you have a friend who happens to be a Hindu, maybe a believing Hindu, they have one of those tattoos on their heads.
Right.
Hey, that tattoo's a religious symbol of a false religion. You can't come in my house with that.
Right.
Do you take it that far? So,
yeah. So let's start with what the Pope said and what he didn't say.
Yeah. Do you have a quote pulled up, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's hear it.
Okay. Here we are quoting the English translation of what he said. I don't know which relation.
Let's clarify this, because this isn't something that he said in the sense of like he's giving an interview and he says this. This is a joint document, a joint declaration that he signed along with some major Islamic leader over in the Middle East.
I did not know that part of it.
Oh, you didn't realize that? Okay, yeah, that's what this actually is, and that's why, in a sense, this has absolutely zero ecclesial meaning. This document represents absolutely no standing whatsoever within the church, and yet when our listeners hear what's actually in the document that the Pope sat down and signed with a leader of another religion, I think it'll become clear why it's still very problematic for the Pope to have done this.
Okay. So what he said is the pluralism and diversity of religions, color, sex, race, and language are willed by God in his wisdom through which he created human beings.
Yeah.
That's the troublesome quote.
And it's one of those, it's almost like it's constructed to make people, especially in the modern age, who don't like making distinctions, afraid to disagree with it. It's because you say, well, I don't agree with that. What? You don't think God created the two sexes? Or you don't think God willed for us to have different, skin colors and so forth? But the problem is the insertion of, religion, which is fundamentally different than all those other categories that were listed.
Yeah.
In the sense that religion is the human choice. It's the exercise of our free will to, and ultimately, fundamentally, we know that we were given free will for the purpose of being allowed to accept God or to reject God. But that's why we have our free will. So if the multiplicity of religions is the exercise of that free will in very specifically accepting or rejecting God as he revealed himself to us, then how do we say that it's God's will that various people be in a religious state of rejecting him?
Yeah. At the very base of this, we have the fact that God is truth, and he only wills truth.
Right.
He never wills falsehood. Now, he allows it sometimes, though.
And there's even a formulation that the church uses. He wills to allow falsehood in the choices of humans, and we talk about that with regards to evil as well, which following a false religion in the sense that it leads one away from God isn't evil. So we say God wills to allow evil, but he does not will evil. And it sounds like, some people think of it as a distinction without a difference. No, it actually has a very big difference. And that difference is the mystery of human free will.
Yeah, and specifically in the way he stated this, we're not talking about, say, the passive will of God, and we're not talking about what he allows.
Exactly.
The way it's worded is willed by God in his wisdom. And which wisdom is that? The one through which he created human beings.
Yeah.
So we're... Great.
So what's she getting excited over?
All right. Someone's outside. I think the boys are outside with their friends, and she's just sitting there barking at them because she can't stand for anyone to be in our yard. But, okay. So
the
where
wisdom...
was I? We're talking about active will of God.
Yes, this is the wisdom in which or through which he created human beings. This is an act of his creation, and therefore,
as if he himself created other religions.
Right. That would have to be the understanding of this statement taken at face value.
Yeah, which is false. It's not the case.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Incorrect. And I don't know. You would think he would know better than to put his name on something like this, but what do you do? It is what it is.
I know. It's what do you do with a pope like this? What do you do when you know? Obviously, you have to acknowledge his juridical authority within the church, but you know, you see stuff like this, and it's like everything he says becomes suspect. It's kind of like having, you know, this pope is kind of like having a calculator that you have to go and do all the math by hand to check the results of the calculator with. Well, with this pope, everything he says, everything he does, you have to go back and compare it to the tradition of the church, and then you find out what the tradition of the church is, and then you say, well, to the extent that the Pope is just reiterating that, then okay, I accept that, but I didn't need it because I've got the tradition of the church so far, and to the extent that he seems to be diverging from it, I have to just ignore it and think of it as the personal opinion of a Pope and not as any kind of church teaching.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this Pope is kind of like placing himself outside of any sense of organic development of church teaching. You know what I mean?
Right. The thing is, I mean, when he first became the Pope, we had gone through a history of the press taking everything, both Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict, everything they said, and pulling things out of context and trying to make it mean something it didn't mean.
Yeah.
And so we got into the habit of seeing someone report something. Well, the Pope said contraception's okay, and then we would go back and read it.
In the context
no, he didn't say that.
No, he didn't even at all say that. It wasn't even close. Exactly.
Yeah. And so we just got in the habit of doing that, to the point where I didn't even look up what he said. I just knew they were wrong.
Yeah.
And now we've got this new Pope who would say things that could very easily be misinterpreted. And little by little, I started to realize, no, the Pope really did say that. And on another popular podcast, they called it red pilling, and referring to the Matrix.
Oh, yeah.
When he decides
red
between
pilling.
the two pills, and it's like suddenly you're shown the truth, and you realize the truth, and you take everything in context with the truth, or you could keep taking the blue pill and living the lie.
Right.
So we've kind of been red-pilled on Pope Francis and what he thinks and the way he talks, and it is what it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. We just pray that he doesn't do anything drastic that would... I don't even know how to express that, because in my belief system, he can't. He cannot change.
Can't, right. He wouldn't be able to change the teaching, but he can sow a lot of confusion.
Right. Yeah, which he has.
That's right. So, okay, so we've got this statement, and it, hopefully it has caused some confusion in the minds of Catholics, and the reason I say hopefully is of course, the Catholics who haven't seen the statement, they wouldn't be confused, but hopefully most Catholics recognize the falseness of that idea that God wills these different religions to exist, that somehow he wants some people to be other than Catholic or other than Christian, and that to cause them to think, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so while taking that statement as it is and just recognizing it for what it is, it's a heresy, nothing to do with it but call it that and then set it aside. But what is the view of other religions? And I think that not just this recent episode with the Pope, but I think ever since Vatican II, in the dogmatic, was it a dogmatic constitution, or was it just a constitution on other religions that on non-Christian religions that the Church developed during Vatican II, that itself contained a little bit of perhaps confusion.
Yeah. And we had other things, like when Pope John Paul II didn't he go to a mosque and pray with the Muslims, something of that nature?
Yes, and I forget. I don't know if he prayed with them. I mean, that's one of those things where he might go into the mosque, he might say a perfectly good Catholic prayer, maybe for the conversion of the Muslims who visit that mosque. I don't know. I don't know what he said. But that's a kind of it's one of those things that people might interpret it. And you might, one group of people might interpret it as saying, hey, look, see, it's okay to be, non-Christian. Even the Pope prayed with Muslims or something like that. Mm-hmm. And other people might say, wait a minute, you're reading far too much into that. Mm-hmm. So you get that. And
it's not like with Pope Francis where you're forced to choose one of those two pills.
Right.
It's one of those things that could still be called innocent. And I guess, but all the same, it did kind of cause some confusion, or at least it got people talking. And, there are traditionalists who pointed to that and just got out of control. This is heresy. This is, abandonment of the Catholic teaching and things like that. And then there were most of us who just said, well, I don't know, he prayed, that's all we know.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, and here's the thing, when we talk about other religions, I think it probably is necessary to separate what we're talking about. There is a difference between, say, another Christian religion and Islam. We can't really treat those as the same thing. And then further separating, something like Hinduism or Buddhism or even satanic religion.
Right. That's that's I think one of the things that's important to note is the you do have there's a difference of relationship to Christianity in various religions, and then there's this concept of something like Satanism, a religion. Regardless of how well they understand what they're doing, the religion is founded on a fundamental rejection of the original creator, God as the creator. Okay, we're going to reject him in favor of Satan, a creature of God who rejected his own creator. And we're going to join that rejection of the Creator. If that kind of a sort of a fundamental outlook, I think that stands apart from almost all the other world religions. I don't think there's any of the major world religions that can be said to be in that camp,
right,
of Satanism.
One of the things, though, about Satanism is that if you're a Catholic and you hear or talk about Satanism, your idea is of a group of people who actually worship the fallen angel.
Right.
And if you talk to one of them, that's not what it is. Their understanding of their own religion is not one of worshiping a demon, but of rejecting God. And it's only the rejection of God that they stress. They stuck Satan in there to show more or less mocking. It's supposed to mock the Catholic rituals, and
okay.
It's more or less worship of humanity, not necessarily. I think the vast majority of Satanists don't actually believe in Satan.
Okay. Which begs the question, do they actually believe in God?
I don't know. They don't. Most of them. There are those you remember in the early ages of heavy metal, there were these, quote, satanic groups, these teenagers who were doing these things and supposedly worshiping Satan. I think that's in a different class.
Okay.
As an organized religion, Satanism simply rejects God, and that's all.
Okay. And
the rest is supposed to mock what we do.
So there's the rejection of God and their fundamental their binding sense of ritual is simply to do everything they can to mock everything that's done in the name of God.
Right.
Which also leads to any kind of cruelty that they might get away with perpetrating and so forth. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess in practice, there's not a whole lot of difference, but it's one of those things that if you're going to talk about it, you should at least point that out.
Yeah. I mean, it's always good to know what you're talking about, and not to blur distinctions. Satanism itself, both those who may be dedicated to the true Satan figure of Christianity, as well as those who simply reject God, believing in God, and even those who reject even maybe they don't even believe in God, but they just reject everything that anybody associates with belief in God. That's kind of like one class of religion all by itself. Almost all the religions that developed in the world, with very few exceptions, at least are based on some kind of attempt to give an appropriate response to what is given to us, to humanity, by God, the gods, this God, that God, whatever. So there's that, sense. There's a sense of we owe the gods because they gave us. There's a sense of often gratitude to the gods or to God, and to the extent that the religions believe in a ongoing interaction with the gods. This idea of a God who is involved in his creation. An idea of petition and asking for things.
Right.
Almost all the major religions have some kind of idea here of that. Another maybe kind of an exception that stands off is this Buddhism, which is kind of this. You can almost think of it as a quasi-religion. It's not really a religion in that sense, because it's more of just a way of thinking about life.
More of a philosophy, but at the same time, a philosophy in practice as opposed in just theory.
And it's a metaphysical philosophy, so it makes assertions about the metaphysics of the world that themselves are fundamentally incompatible with Christianity. So, for example, you can't say, "Well, I'm religiously Christian, but philosophically I'm a Buddhist." That would be nonsensical,
right?
But anyway, so you've got these different religions, and
all of this points to the fact that Jesus himself said that the laws of God are written on the hearts of man, and it's the fact that it's part of the human nature to know and understand that we come from somewhere, and that which we came from should be acknowledged and shown gratitude.
Right. And in fact, that's really the Catholic definition of adoration. When we talk about, the four principal purposes of prayer, adoration is the first one, and it's adoration is a act of acknowledgement. So during Vatican II, there was a lot of questioning going on about the work of missionizing and evangelizing people from other religions, going into other lands where people, may not be familiar with the gospel, and teaching them, about Christianity and so on and so forth. And Vatican II came out with this document, and I should have prepared for this podcast by having it pulled up in front of me so I could just quote from it directly. But it talked about the idea of salvation and the availability of salvation to people in various states relative to Christianity. And the specifically, they were trying to give the right understanding of the Catholic Church's teaching that all salvation comes through the Catholic Church, and that outside of the Catholic Church there is no salvation, which is still a teaching of the Church. And I think there's a lot of misinformation. People think, oh, the Church doesn't teach that anymore. Well, no, the Church does still teach that. However, the Church has clarified that in some ways by pointing out, and we can give an initial idea of this by talking first about other Christian religions, like, say, Lutheranism or Baptist religion or something like that.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, somebody who, let's say they're Lutheran, okay, as a Lutheran, they get baptized. And the person who baptizes them, they have a sense of church, and when they do the baptism, they are acting to do what the Church does. The Church does baptism as one of its sacraments, and so somebody in the Lutheran Church gets baptized, and they're doing what the Church does. So we say, well, that baptism is real, and therefore it has certain effects. It takes away original sin. If the person is old enough to have committed actual sins, it removes the effects of those actual sins on the person's soul, and it makes them a child of God. Basically, it puts them in a state of grace where if they were to die at that point, they would be saved, even though that baptism came through, say, by a Lutheran minister or whatever. And so, therefore, we say that these other Christian religions, although not fully united with the Church of Christ, which is the Catholic Church, they nonetheless share some kind of participation in the life of grace of the church. So somebody who's a Lutheran, it would be incorrect to say that being a better and better Lutheran can get you saved. However, you could say that a Lutheran, by virtue of being a poor Catholic, can be saved. So that in that sense, the salvation of those Lutherans who are saved is by virtue of their participation, even though they don't realize it, in the Catholic Church. And the same for every other Christian religion. So then the church goes on to talk about other religions. And it's not so much about the other religions, it's about the people. What it points out is this idea of what's called invincible ignorance. So they consider the case of somebody who has never been evangelized, has not been around people who are Christian, has not had any opportunity to hear the gospel message. And the church in this document goes on to point out that such a person might be saved. Now, here's where it gets kind of dicey, because if you take that and you make too much of it, you risk creating the impression that almost anybody out there could be saved just by, I don't know, being a nice person or whatever. Whatever. It risks allowing us to take our own concept of what it means to be a good human being and impose that as the condition for salvation, which the church teaches is not how God does it. So when we say they might be saved, that kind of creates a bit of a problematic area. So the best we can really do to interpret that is to say, okay, this person doesn't have baptism available to them, which, is the normal way by which someone unites to the Catholic Church. But we can't necessarily put some kind of constraint on God and rule out the possibility that God might, through some invisible and extraordinary means, unite some other person with the Catholic Church who otherwise doesn't know anything about the Catholic Church.
That's kind of...
And that's as far as we can take it. We can't even assert that there are specific circumstances under which God does that. We can't even assert that we know God does do that. All we can say is that we can't limit God from doing that in our theology.
And I think, I don't know the point of having even put that in the Vatican II, but
exactly,
I think
that's what I was
at our stage, what we can look at there is seeing that this was addressing the fact that you cannot put limits on God and you can't put limits on salvation. That's God's power. All we can do is understand the laws that he gave to us and follow them. Because those laws are on people, not on God.
And know that the path he gave us to salvation, that's the only path that we absolutely know to be open to everyone. And that's the urgency of mission work, is to make that path available to every person on earth.
Yeah. Which, you get into things like church history here, and we had this Jewish people who were confined to a very small corner of the globe, and it wasn't until the Romans, who had spread out all over the globe, it wasn't until the Romans had occupied Israel that Jesus Christ came.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like God,
so that this could be spread all over the world through Rome.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's kind of part of the providence of salvation history is God arranged for the fulfillment of all of the promises of the prophets, for the completion of salvation to occur at that point when the world was primed through the expanse of the Roman Empire to carry this message everywhere, to carry the gospel everywhere.
Which it did.
Yeah, yeah.
When we talk about, and I think the documents use the words invincible ignorance.
Yes.
And so that's a big word. That's a buzzword. You know, everybody's got invincible ignorance.
Right.
Let's talk about that in concerned with other Christian churches.
So you're thinking like
so a Lutheran,
like a Lutheran who has no opportunity to, say, consider Catholicism?
Yeah.
Which would be kind of weird because almost everywhere Lutherans and Catholics kind of, exist together. But yeah, I could say like take an area where Catholicism is outlawed in favor of say, Lutheranism. I don't know if it ever was in any part of the world. Like in England, it was outlawed,
right.
in favor of Anglicanism.
Yeah.
But right, yeah, take someone, who's raised in that, who never knows any different, who isn't taught anything about the Catholic faith. Okay. And the thing is about these Christian religions is, like I said, there's that point of baptism. We know that baptism is a singular moment when a mark is placed on the soul that marks that soul as a child of God. The original sin and all sins up to that point are removed. The guilt is removed. And that soul is in a state now where that person would go to heaven. And that exists irrespective of invincible ignorance or anything else.
Right.
And so
very few people stay that way for a very long time.
Well, that's my point. That person has salvation now, and it's theirs to lose, which, many would over, the course of a few years of life, especially in the modern world, so many temptations. But so the Catholic Church has this sacrament of penance, confession, reconciliation that's known by, several names, but it's all, it amounts to the same thing. It's this unburdening yourself of your sins, God taking that away from you, just like in Psalm 51, blot out my offense. It, kind of draw my offense.
Which would not be available to someone unless they were Catholic.
Exactly.
Well, I guess there's a couple other, but the Orthodoxes and
right, yeah. There are some who have the apostolic succession and continue with that sacrament. But see, that's the question. How would somebody else who's not Catholic and who loses that state of grace, so to speak, how would they have any reasonable surety of getting that back without that sacrament? That's
the two paths that are most commonly talked about are number one, having true contrition. I think that's the way it's worded.
The
being
perfect
sorry.
contrition.
Okay, perfect contrition. Being sorry for your sins, not because you're afraid to go to hell, but because you understand that you've offended God and you don't want to offend God and are sorry for that. In cases where confession is not available, that would bring you to a less culpable state for your sins.
Right. Well, not yeah, I don't know if less culpable is the right word, but it's understood that can restore you to grace.
Okay. So, and then the
know,
other part is,
the other path is confession.
Well, but you've got, you go back to ignorance. This man sinned. He is sorry that he sinned. He doesn't want to go to hell, but he does not know about confession.
Right.
And then there's the question of, we almost should have just done a podcast on this. There's the question of, what is ignorance? If you're raised Lutheran and you wholeheartedly believe every part of that religion, and some joker comes up, starts talking about the Catholic Church and about what you can do and what you should do, it's not abnormal to just kind of reject that wholeheartedly, and not even to give it really any space in your mind to make you question what you've always known to be true.
That's true, and so is your ignorance considered invincible then?
Because I've heard a lot of people say, well, no, he knows about the church. It's in the news. We're everywhere. And he's been told by his old grandmother that if he didn't go to confession, he was going to go to hell. So he's not ignorant. But hearing something is not knowing it. And is the ignorance extended to what we know, or simply what we've been told?
Well, if you consider that faith itself is... This kind of gets into an area of mystery, because faith itself is, in the sense that it's the response of our spirit to the revealed truth of God. It's also a gift of God,
right?
As one of the theological virtues, we will to firmly believe, but God gives us the will of being able to do that. So somebody who is handed the truth, but you would say has no reason to give that any consideration, no reason in terms of their earthly life.
Right.
Does that mean that for reasons that only God knows, God is withholding the gift of faith from that person? Does that constitute invincible ignorance, or does that constitute a rejection of faith? You know what I mean? That's one of those. That's. I think that goes to why we are so. Why we have such an obligation to be able to give reasonable explanations for things, and why we have an obligation to be willing to engage people. It's kind of like St. Paul says, be ready to give a defense of what you believe.
Right. I remember as a young teenager, Mom sitting me down and saying, you have to learn this. I need you to learn this. And I'm like, why do I have to learn this? I'm Catholic and I'm not rejecting it. Who cares? But, later on in life, suddenly that's, it's going to be challenged, and in my head it didn't matter if it's challenged because I'm not going to fall for it. But it's not just about what we fall for, it's about what we can show to other people.
Right.
And of course, if you can't show it to someone else, eventually you will begin to question it.
Well, that's true. Yeah, especially, and it's one thing, if you know why you believe something in spite of, this or that challenge to it or whatever, okay, that could be one thing. But yeah, even if you somehow know it, but feel like you can't put it into words, there's going to eventually be that point where you say, okay, wait a minute. If I can't put it into words, do I really know it? If I can't kind of lay it out as an explanation, then do I really even understand it? And if I don't really understand it, what am I doing?
Right.
And
I know Protestants who used to be Catholic, and they talk about their faith the way, or they talk about the Catholic religion in a way that it's obvious they don't know anything about the Catholic religion. And they're quick to criticize the religion without knowing anything about it. And, they call themselves recovering Catholics, as if they were once lost and then they found the truth. And it's hard to make them see that they never did know the truth, and they still don't know it because they never did learn their faith.
Yeah.
And they always say, well, I went to Catholic school for 12 years, as if that means they did learn their faith.
Probably during those 12 years, the faith was hidden from them more so than from somebody who didn't go to Catholic school.
Yeah. It's a sad state of affairs, at least here in America.
Catholic education is if you want your kids to stay Catholic, don't send them to Catholic schools these days. I mean, that's unfortunately I think that's the reality in many parts of the United States, many dioceses of the United States.
Yeah.
But that kind of brings to mind what to me is one of the proofs, I think, of the Catholic faith, and this goes largely for Protestantism and most non-Catholic brands of Christianity, but also for non-Christian religions. And it's this, that when you look at this idea of conversion, and you think of, and you hear these stories of people. I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of conversion stories, but I think I hear more conversion stories of people who left the Catholic faith than who came into it.
Yeah.
But if you think of this idea of a conversion story, you could think of an idea. You can come up with this concept of a pure conversion story, and what I mean by a pure conversion story is one where the person is in a faith, in a belief, a practice that they fully embrace, that they fully understand, and that they really love. And then they find a greater fulfillment of everything that they love about their current faith in a different one, or their current practice in a different one, and then they go to that as a greater fulfillment. Well, if you think that could kind of like be a pure conversion story. I mean, that's kind of like the conversion story of St. Paul, for example.
Sure.
And then you've got the impure conversion stories, the rejection of the faith stories. You've got the I want to live my life stories. The people who are in a faith and then they decide, wait a minute, this faith doesn't allow me to live my life this way. I want to live my life this way, so I'm going to drop this faith. Or, gee, this faith asks me to believe these things. I have trouble believing these things, so I'm going to drop this faith, and that kind of stuff. So you got people who were never really in their religion, or if they were in it, their life hit some kind of a bump that they said, well, gee, I would just rather be allowed to live my life this way than continue to follow the religion that I've been following. And so they leave for that reason. Now, here's the thing but here's the thing that I've noticed. I have yet to hear of one single pure conversion story away from the Catholic Church, from a Catholic to something that's non-Catholic, and yet there are hundreds probably, I mean, probably tens of thousands, but from what I hear, dozens or hundreds of pure conversion stories into the Catholic Church. These are people who were really about what they were doing. Most prominently Protestants, often Protestant ministers, and they're doing what everybody does and working to deepen their faith, working to continue to know God more deeply and to know His will in their lives. And then something causes them to suddenly realize that there's this special place that the Catholic Church and the Catholic faith just kind of fits right into their lives. And it's like everything that they loved about their religion, there's just more of it in the Catholic faith.
It's odd how many Catholic or Protestant ministers will convert to Catholicism, and how few Catholic priests will leave the faith. And when it does happen, it's generally because of some woman they met and they want to marry, or something of that nature.
It's
or just falling into sin, and
And that's my point. Every single person who leaves the Catholic faith falls into one of two categories. Either they don't really know the Catholic faith, and so they're leaving something that they never even knew it in the first place. You can't count those for anything. Or they've discovered that they want to live their life some way. There's some sin that has come up that they've decided, well, wait a minute, my Catholic faith doesn't let me do this, and my desire to do this is stronger than my desire to stay true to the truth. And so they leave the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
Every single person who leaves the Catholic faith follows one of those two categories. But there are lots of people who come into the Catholic faith that fits neither of those categories for the faith that they're coming from. And to me, that's one of the big big tell. Anthropological proofs of the truth of the Catholic Church. So
we are so far off topic now.
I know. But so what about your personal life, your home, your household, and
So you're out with
do you open your door
friends.
to Jehovah's Witnesses who stop by, stuff like that?
Yeah, you're out with friends, and you say go to a restaurant to eat, and it's a Baptist sitting next to you, and we're going to say prayers.
Yeah.
Do you pray with them? But what if the same thing happened with a Hindu? I think that's two different classes.
I think it is.
And should have two different responses.
Yeah.
There's, first of all, you should have some way to discern who is praying to God and who is not.
Mm-hmm.
And if they are praying to God, as in they believe that there is one true God, even if they don't understand that God the way He really is, I would think it's okay to pray with them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
And I don't know if that includes the Trinity or not.
Well, what I would think of it is this. It's if they, you for example, you don't have to do the thing like joining hands around the table or something like that.
Right.
You can say, well, I'd prefer to fold my hands. This is how I pray.
Right.
And then you can just silently say your prayer. The other way, if they're willing to let you lead, is that they're praying with you. Okay, so you could do something like that. That's a lot. When we have dinners at our house, and like Terry's family might be over, or something like that, and they're not Catholic, we'll say grace, and they everybody's respectful during that time. But yeah, if you're out with a group, it can become kind of dicey. Okay, do you just quietly make the sign of the cross and pray? I tend to do that in a way that's not kind of like in everybody's face, but that if anybody wants to ask what I'm doing, I can tell them.
Right. Yeah, I had mentioned that I would go to these some men's prayer type meetings, and I would go ahead and join in the prayer. I don't remember ever having a situation where it's one of those deals where I cannot say the prayer you guys are saying. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And of course, these are Christians, so they do worship the Trinity as we do. But when you get to something like a Jehovah's Witness, you're no longer talking about the Trinity. It's a little bit different.
Right.
So a prayer with a Jehovah's Witness would be just a little different.
Yeah, it would be problematic, most probably.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, we probably shouldn't pray with Jehovah's Witnesses. We can invite them to pray with us, but probably shouldn't be praying with them.
Which brings us to those
do you let
other
them come
two
in your
groups.
house? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so well, let's go over that real quick, though. Do we? I mean, do you let them come into your house, and then if you're getting ready to eat and they want to pray, I mean,
yeah. Do you say no? Wait, you guys can't do your prayer. I don't think so.
I think if you've got a person who does not understand God the way you understand God, but still honestly seeks to understand God and honor God in what way he understands how, it's not you're not sinning by allowing them to do that in your house.
Right. If they're now, we should.
And you're not necessarily taking part in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I guess that's the thing. If somebody's religious rituals aren't some kind of explicit rejection of your God, in the sense that like we talked about Satanism as being sort of a thing set apart,
right? Because
what defines it is this idea of rejection of God. If it doesn't fall into a category like that, my own personal feeling is okay. Understanding that no, my household doesn't participate in your ritual. But if you need to do that ritual as part of your act of sitting down to a meal or whatever, I'm not going to tell you get out of here.
Right.
Now,
and if you're talking to a Muslim who suddenly jumps up and says, "Oh, I have to do my," they do some kind of thing.
Take his mat somewhere. Yeah, they've got this thing. They got to bow to Mecca.
I think I would probably allow it.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, yeah, I understand you need to do your thing. And I might even, afterwards say, "Hey, let's talk. I'm curious why you do that," and try to lead that into a discussion of, that may plant a few seeds, that can take root later down the road. But, that's, I think we don't have to be we don't have to bring the hammer down even within our own house. We make it clear that our household is a house of the Christian God. We maybe have the crucifixes on our walls and stuff like that, the various sacred imagery. We say our prayers, and we're very comfortable doing that, and anybody who's with us can join us. But we don't have to kind of like beat everybody who's not there yet, who's still seeking. They've got their own rituals or whatever. So that's kind of my feeling about it. Now, honestly, if somebody...
It does bring up something, though.
What's that?
About, there's an argument to be made, which I don't necessarily hold, that if you're talking to a Jew or a Muslim, they are worshiping the same God that you worship. They just don't know about the other two persons of the Trinity.
Oh, yeah, that's I would argue a little bit about the Muslim part of it, but a Jew, yeah. Yeah, and
And
in fact,
I would still say that that it would not be good to actually pray with them.
oh, right. I see what you, yeah. No, I agree. I think that when it comes to praying with, it should pretty much probably be, restricted to praying with other Christians and praying in a Christian sense with
Right.
them.
And of course, I mean, there are other things you could do, maybe not have to do, but I think it's respectful if, okay, we're going to say prayers. This Jew obviously doesn't want to say prayers with us. Can you give him a moment of silence or let him do his thing? Yeah, I kind of flip back and forth on that one.
Yeah, I'm kind of more of the, for example, if let's say I were somebody in that camp, I was, going to be having dinner with somebody that I knew was, not the same. I have some ritual of prayer that I have to do before a meal. Okay. And there's somebody I'm going to be having a meal with, and they're Christian. They don't do the same ritual. I would probably find a way to satisfy the ritual in a way that doesn't disrupt the flow within their household.
Right.
Personally. And so my feeling is...
Let me slip out to my car for a second.
If somebody is a guest in my house, he's, if he hasn't figured out a way to do that, and if he feels like he needs a moment, I expect him to ask me. And if he asks me, then I might say, okay, yeah, sure, go ahead. We'll just be respectfully quiet while we're passing our food around, something like that. But that, but I don't think I need to necessarily make myself aware of his religious needs and then set up to accommodate them without him even asking.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So then you were moving on to another topic, not about having them in your house, but
I can't remember what I was going to say now.
We talked about like Jehovah's Witnesses. We're stepping away from that common Christianity that we share with Protestants.
Yeah, so you've got Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, I guess. They don't believe in the Trinity, do they?
No, they don't.
They think they do, I think, but they don't.
No, because the Spirit doesn't have any meaning for them.
Okay.
Because Jesus is to them simply the firstborn of one of us. We're all basically brothers of Jesus as born.
Okay.
Well, I think Jesus is like a brother of Adam. Like Jesus is the firstborn in flesh and bone of the Father, but Adam is the secondborn, and then we're all from Adam or something like that.
Now when it comes
Mormonism is difficult.
Yeah. When it comes to, say, having them in your house, and if they're wearing or carrying, a lot of these religions, one of their big things is getting as far away from Catholicism as they can. And it's always Catholicism they're getting away from. And so most of them reject any sort of religious articles simply because that's what Catholics have.
Ah, right.
So if one had some kind of religious article with them, I don't know, I guess I would tolerate it.
Well, I'll give you an example. I don't know a whole lot about the religion, but for example, there are a couple of guys that I was working with up in Michigan who were sheikhs, which is a kind of religion. And they're the guys, they wear the turbans, and they don't shave their beards. I don't think they cut their hair either. I don't know, but I asked the guy, one of them about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, we have this turban, and he said some of them have like a pre-made turbans they just put on. He prefers to actually wrap his every day. It's kind of a ritual. And he said there were like 5 things that they do, and the turban is one, the not shaving the beard is one, and another one is like there's some kind of wristband they wear, so some kind of woven thing around the wrist. Okay, so these are articles of their religious practice. Okay, so he's wearing his, you've invited some people from work over for a, I don't know, poker party or something like that. I guess in one sense, if you had a problem with his religious articles, you could just not invite him. But the question is, should you? I mean, would it be okay as a Catholic? Should you feel funny about inviting him over and then him being in your house wearing his turban and his wristband and whatever, knowing that these are articles of religion for him? Again, this religion is not okay. It's not Christian, and it's a false religion in the sense that it's a religion that was established by somebody seeking something completely outside of the body of revelation that's not tied to Judaism or Christianity or anything like that. So it's a false religion in that sense. But there's nothing in it that is aimed at being a rejection of the Christian God. It's just, it doesn't comprehend the Christian God.
Right.
And personally, I wouldn't feel funny about having, him in my house in that kind of a context.
Okay. Let me give you another scenario. He comes to your house, he's got his religious garbs, you're playing poker, and suddenly he has a heart attack. Now, you've got the ambulance there. He feels as though he's on the verge of death. And I don't know, he's reaching for his whatever so that he could say whatever prayers as he prepares to die. Oh, he's got
some kind of
those articles are not Christian, are not of God, and he's about to, I don't know, use them in some way in prayer, the way we might use a rosary. Do you give it to him?
Do you give it to him or not? And here's where I would say, here's where I would kind of approach it with this kind of a calculus. Is this a case? You ask yourself, is this a case where, whether he gets the object and does the things that he's been trained to do or that he wants to do, is it going to make a difference in the question of his salvation? Is getting it or not getting it, either way, going to move him closer to or further from any sense of salvation? If the answer is no, then my feeling is go for the human comfort and give him his article.
Yeah.
That's my answer. Now, I know there are people who would give a different answer than that.
That would be my answer. I'm trying to think of other scenarios that might crop up. What about visiting another place of worship?
Oh, like if I'm
and I'm trying to think of a situation where you would do that.
Well, let's say you're touring India, and you see you want to go see some temples for the culture. You want to,
or better yet,
see the culture. So
you are some sort of representative from America, say an ambassador.
Okay. You're ambassador or secretary of state or something like that.
The state of the state of nonsense, and
that's right.
You're visiting the state of common sense. But I have a temple or whatever there I pray, and in a lot of other countries, the religious leaders are also political leaders. So,
yep, that's true.
It is somewhat fitting for them to want you to meet them or to put on some kind of photo thing at the temple.
At their place of worship, right.
And I guess this is where it gets a little gray, because now we're saying an ambassador or something like that, or even a president. Then the next question is, but what about a pope, who is not just a leader of a state, he's the leader of a religion, or a bishop, right. Something like that. Right. I personally believe it's inappropriate.
Yeah, I kind of think so too. And in fact, that the church for a long time has had protocols about various situations like this. And I think some of, for example, you brought up some of the antics of John Paul II. The one thing was he was going in that mosque or whatever. Another thing was he received some kind of weird headdress from some tribal juju man or something somewhere. But the thing is that I think he was. I'm sure he felt that there were good reasons, and even reasons relative to reaching out to the people, of these faiths, in the spirit of perhaps opening dialogue with a hope of eventual, bringing them into the Christian fold or whatever. But I think he was maybe breaking some of these protocols that were in place. And I know, for example, another protocol that has been in place that was recently done away with under the current Pope had to do with not the Pope visiting two other places, but when people come and visit the Pope. People who are in I don't know if it was all irregular marriages or if it was just those who had like divorced and remarried outside of the church or something like that. But basically, people who were in irregular marriages, the Pope would not receive them as a couple. He could receive one. He could receive one, and then he could receive the other if they both had individual reasons for having an audience with them, but he would not receive them as a couple. Well, Pope Francis did away with this.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's and that's the thing, the and I guess if you're the head of a religion, you kind of have a responsibility to your followers to think about these things ahead of time and to have protocols set up so that when situations are coming up, when you get invitations to this and that and the other, your various secretaries know ahead of time, okay, well, he can do this, but he can't do this. Can we arrange this? And, they can arrange appropriate visitation procedures and so forth.
When you're talking about a religious leader, there's a responsibility, I think, to not validate something against your religion.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's
in the same way if you have kids and one of those kids gets married outside the church and the kid says, well, I want to come visit for a few days and I'm bringing my spouse, then you're faced with the decision to allow them to stay in the same room or to say, I'm sorry, you're not married. You can come visit and you can stay at a hotel, but you can't live that lifestyle in my house because you can't validate it.
Right. And that's what we've had to do. In fact, it's been, well, you can stay in our house in separate rooms.
Yeah.
That can cause it can cause some resentment, but it makes the point. It gives you the opportunity to say, this is what we believe, and you're outside of what we believe right now.
Right.
So, but
okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I can't think of anything else to say about all that, but I'm sure.
I will say one more thing though. There's this is something, and if a certain person listens to our podcast, he may feel like it's targeted, and so be it, because it kind of is. But in dealing with these things, we've talked about, what if people are visiting you? What about you going and visiting other people? What do you accept and what do you walk into, and so on and so forth. But, I feel like the one thing that we should never do is presume to go into somebody else's house and then start laying down the religious law with them.
Right.
Tell them not to do something in their own house.
Certainly not.
If we don't like it, we can just avoid visiting them. But that's something that no matter how true our religion is, there's God Himself has set it up so that people have their own areas, their own spheres of dominion within the places they live and so forth, and we don't violate that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I think that's a pretty good discussion.
Think that's good.
We hit a lot of different things. Don't know if you have a name for this talk yet.
I'll think of something. I have this huge list of current events.
Oh yeah,
so events. Much has happened.
Gosh, do we even have
we
time
missed
to talk about it all? Yeah.
Okay, well, let's just at least mention some of these things.
Right.
We missed last week, so we did not get a chance to talk about the Green New Deal.
The Green New Deal. I mean, as far as I can tell, the Green New Deal is nothing more than a bunch of mixed up democratic propositions that they're trying to gain some kind of popular support by linking it with Roosevelt's New Deal by calling it the Green New Deal. And that it's not a New Deal, and it's not even particularly green, and
most of it's fantasy.
This is a weird thing. Maybe I'll even put this in my blog sometime, but this happens all the time. We have a period of mostly Republican rule, usually through a Republican in the White House, Republican administration, but sometimes if we're lucky, a Republican House and or Senate for a period, and then Democrats come into some kind of power. Now, in this case, they didn't even really come into power. They don't have the White House.
They gained a small advantage in the House.
They gained a little bit of advantage. Was it the House or the Senate? But but the thing is, every time they get a little bit of power and it almost feels like suddenly it's a bunch of kids who, are like suddenly given a bunch of responsibilities that they have no preparation for. That's right. What it feels like whenever Democrats try to do something.
We're going to eat ice cream for dinner.
Yeah, it's like that. I mean, it's like there's just this callowness about how they want to go about stuff that is just astounding. And that's not getting into any of the moral issues or anything like that. It's just the silliness of it. It's like, wait a minute, guys, you're talking about running a country here, not a school social club.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, so that's my rant.
Alexandria Cortez, who was at the head of this deal.
Yeah.
Now, she's in New York, and I know, like, over a year ago, Amazon was talking about a second headquarters. Cincinnati was in the running. I think we got to the 20 list and then not past that. But we wanted them. You're talking about thousands of new jobs, tons of money going into the economy. It boosts everything. You can't think of a way it's bad for an economy for this to happen. We wanted them. They ended up choosing New York. Now, we're talking about close to $30 billion worth of tax revenue for New York.
Mm-hmm.
In order to get them, they gave them a $3 billion tax cut.
Right.
In other words, money that they would not have to pay as long as they paid the rest of the money, $30 billion. This is over a 10-year period. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, no way. We're going to take that $3 billion and spend it on other things, and you're not getting the tax cut.
Which, of course, Amazon said, all right, goodbye.
Fine. Yeah, okay. Have fun with your $3 billion that doesn't even exist.
It's like, hey, I've got this car. I've got this car for, $5,000 I want to sell you. And you're like, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $4,000 for it. And I'm like, okay. And then my sister comes along and says, no way, we're not going to sell it to you for $4,000. We're going to take that $1,000 and we're going to do this with it. And of course you're walking away. Like,
yeah, just scratching your head like, did this really happen?
Exactly.
Is this person serious?
And how did a person like this get elected to a U.S. legislative body?
It's insane. Well, what happened, we have to remember, she was running against a guy who had been there forever, and he thought she was not even a consideration. So he wouldn't even debate her. And he
shouldn't. I mean, why would he think anything else?
Right.
She's an idiot.
But she somehow gathered a bunch of other millennials and got them to vote for her, and that's how she got into office. Next term, there's no way she's going to win the next primary unless the Democrats choose to go ahead and stand behind her. But I don't think that's going to happen at all. Yeah. I think he'll come back and beat her, but who knows? Let's see. We can skip this one. Kim Jong-un, they're scheduled to go to Vietnam on the 25th of February. That's actually, we're recording on the 24th, so that's tomorrow when he's going to get to Vietnam. There's also Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un, I'm sorry. Yeah, North Korea. We're meeting them, and on the 25th of February is when they're scheduled to arrive in Vietnam. Okay.
I'm pouring a drink. I'm having a dandrum during this discussion.
Okay.
Which, by the way, I should put a shout out for Dandrums. It's a wonderful drink, and it's kind of, you may notice the what's the word? You may notice that it's kind of close to the word tantrum, but it's actually the opposite of a tantrum, because a tantrum is like a cry of frustration and anger and so forth, whereas a dandrum is like joy and goodwill and cheer, and it's a...
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm pouring myself a drink called a dandrum.
A drink is called a dandrum.
A dandrum, D-A-N-D-R-U-M, and it's an IPA beer, an Imperial Pale Ale or India Pale Ale, with a shot of rum. And
All right.
it's really good.
I'm going to point something out.
What's that?
And I don't mean for you to take offense.
I'm having a tantrum. I'm not going to take offense.
All right. I notice that how do I say this? There's a direct correlation between how geeky a person was growing up to how much they know about alcoholic beverages when they are older.
Seriously?
You don't notice that?
You're going to have to... Everybody I hang out with is kind of geeky.
Yeah, and they probably all know a lot about beers and whiskeys and wines. Don't they?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know. What difference
I'm
does it
telling
make?
you, I've noticed this.
Okay, so I'm holding true to the.
Yes, you are. I'm kind of in between there, but and like when we have out of the three of us, Jason was probably the most popular growing up, and he will pretend. He will pretend. Okay, definitely. He will pretend to know a lot about all these different beers and stuff, but he really doesn't. And if you hand him a Budweiser, he'll drink that, or if you hand him anything, he'll drink it. And
yeah.
He does not buy the expensive beers except when he's going out where it might make him look.
Oh,
it's a pretentious thing. He has to act like he was a geek too.
He's a poser.
Yeah. Jason's a poser when it comes to alcoholic beverages. He'll drink anything with alcohol in it. He'll drink cough medicine. But it's just something I've noticed over the years.
Okay, well, I certainly am not offended at that.
Okay. Alright, so this is kind of weird. There was a summit scheduled between Israel and some Czechoslovakian group in Hungary. It involved Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia.
Okay.
It was canceled by Poland because Israel officials' statements on the Holocaust alleged that the Poles were involved in it.
Okay, so alleged that Poland was somehow responsible for part of the Holocaust. Now, I mean that's a strange thing for. Okay, so who was who took offense to that?
It's called the Weisgrid Group, and I don't know personally. I don't know the actual person who made this decision.
Because I mean, wasn't Poland part of conquered Nazi territory?
Right. Yeah, and they were occupied.
Yeah, I mean, as an occupied power, whatever they did during that time was under occupation. How can you hold that against? How can somebody who's Polish today consider that a statement like that to apply to them?
Right.
That statement applies to occupied Poland.
Right.
And certainly the Jews, certainly the Israelites not Israelites, the Israelis understand that.
I would think so. But I guess maybe somebody misspoke and they need to straighten it out. But this summit that was scheduled has been canceled because of that.
Oh my. Wow.
Yeah,
it is weird and okay. I'm not one of those who is like I'm not like, say, for example, the Germans. They have laws, for example, saying that say you can't be a Holocaust denier or something like that. I mean, it's gotten really kind of weird when it comes to Holocaust stuff. I'm not weird one way or the other, but I have noticed in the modern trend, and I don't know who all the players in the summit are. I haven't even, I'm hearing about it from you for the first time. But among the sort of the growing liberal elite around the world, there's kind of this, they're kind of making space to accommodate a certain amount of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's what's really going on here, is that this is really some kind of anti-Semitism that has derailed this summit.
Yeah. I would not, if someone told me that, I wouldn't be surprised. But I have no idea. It's just kind of an odd thing. It popped up in the news right before you called, as I was going through the news, and I saw that, and I thought, wow, that's weird. It happened last week, or sometime during this week, but
right.
All right, it is what it is. We'll have to look more into it. We got President Trump starting on the wall with his state of national emergency. 16 states are suing him to put a stop to it. I guess we'll just have to let that go through the courts.
Which states?
I don't know.
How many of
California. I don't even know.
Are they the states that most likely benefit from the payoffs of drug and human trafficking cartels? Is it those states?
I don't know. I would imagine that California's included in there. It doesn't. Oh, here we go. We got California, Nevada. What's right north of California? I don't know what the state is. Let's say.
Like Oregon or Washington?
Yeah, I think it's Oregon. No, not. Oh, here we go. Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, and Virginia.
Those are the 16.
Yeah.
Well, some of them are just doing it just because they're going to do that to anything Trump tries to do.
Yeah. I think all of them are.
That could be that. It could be that there's not a single bit of actual principle behind any of their objections.
The big two who it would affect the most, it looks like, is Arizona and Texas.
Oh, they are not protesting it.
Right.
Well, maybe they're the ones who,
I think they're the ones who get hit hardest by...
soldiers on the ground, they're the ones who know the reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm surprised about New Mexico, though.
I kind of am, too. But I would bet that it's not like a unanimous thing there.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
well. Let's see, we got Rod Rosenstein stepping down. Who cares? Oh! Payless Shoes filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They're going to close all their stores. Payless Shoes.
Payless? No kidding.
Yeah. Payless and Pickway. Remember growing up? That's where we went.
Yep, that's where all of our shoes came from.
Yeah. They were all junk.
Go to Shoe Carnival. Yep, they were. I mean, they were the shoes, the place you stopped on your way out to your prom to buy that nice shiny pair of shoes that you wore that one time.
Yeah. Or the gym
probably
shoes that we wore every day because that's what we could afford.
That's right. Well, it's been a long time since I've been in a Payless or a Pickway. I get most of my shoes at probably Shoe Carnival. Now, actually, yeah, Shoe Carnival, because they always have the buy one, get one half off kind of thing.
I get mine from Goodwill.
From where?
Goodwill.
Oh, yeah. Well, you might be getting higher quality shoes than I get.
Yeah, I do. I just got a leather jacket from Goodwill for $25.
Real leather?
Yeah. It's replacing my 20-year-old leather jacket that I've been wearing forever.
Wow. Yeah,
we'll see how long this one lasts.
Goodwill's a good place.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, lots of people donate, you know, all various quality of stuff there, but Goodwill's mission is a good mission. It's basically to provide jobs.
I got things to say about that, but I'm not going to say it here.
Okay, well, that's fine. I always wonder about, because I have donated things to Goodwill, and I always look up places before I donate to them, and I looked at their mission. It's to provide jobs. Basically.
I'll say this.
That's their mission.
Look at Goodwill's money flow compared to St. Vincent de Paul.
Yeah, but St. Vincent de Paul has a different mission.
Yeah. You're right.
I mean,
I did not know that was...
St. Vincent de Paul is to serve the poor. Goodwill is to provide jobs. That's their mission.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay.
Their service is to the people who are working in the stores.
Yeah.
So if you look at it from that... Yeah, well, there you go.
All right. Bernie Sanders, he's going to run. This should be fun. To be honest, I thought he was the only one who had a chance to beat Trump in 2016.
Yeah, but he's such a rampant socialist.
I know, but look, Alexandria Cortez.
Honestly, oh gosh, what is it with America's like modern? I don't know. It's like a fascination with socialism.
I don't know, but I like a lot of them don't even know what socialism is.
It's like an infatuation, yeah. You know,
they think that social justice is socialism. They equate the two.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. I guess they are very much alike, but they don't understand what socialism is. Most of them. A lot of millennials out there, you say socialism, to them that means fighting social injustice. I don't think most millennials know what socialism is. Like, they think Sweden and Denmark are socialists.
Oh, yeah.
They don't get it. So people like Bernie Sanders comes out and says, I'm a socialist. They think, oh yeah, it's going to be like Denmark. I don't... Yeah. You just got to pray that, you know, some of them just kind of grow up in the next 10 years.
The thing is, you ask people to explain, like, ask anybody. It's just kind of the popular crowd, you know, normal people that you might meet. You ask them to explain what they think socialism is, how it works, and you won't find somebody who describes a system that sounds like it was designed for real human beings. I mean, every description I've ever heard of how a socialist system should work, you know, by proponents of socialism, sounds like it's invented for some alien race that has no real connections to actual human beings and human needs and human behaviors and human motivations and so forth.
Or history. Yeah.
Or history, yeah.
I don't know why. It's really kind of a weird phenomenon right now. And we got to pray that it doesn't go too far. And I was glad to see Trump speak against it in his State of the Union address.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, here's something. The Supreme Court, this is a unanimous decision, ruled that the Eighth Amendment applies to local and state governments. This is the prohibition of excessive fines and charges. One of these things that sort of it flows into is the local government's ability to take people's property when they catch them in a crime.
Oh, okay.
And part of it is that they found out, I mean, the story that I read is that most local governments rely on confiscated property
as part of their income.
Right.
Huh.
And I've heard
never
stories.
That.
I was listening to one of our local guys here in Cincinnati. He was talking about this case where the DEA had found someone with a suitcase full of cash and had what's that word when the government had seized it,
right?
Because in their opinion he shouldn't have had all that cash, but he hadn't done anything wrong. He had taken it out of the bank, and for whatever reason he had it, and it took him like a year to get it back. And when he did get it back, he didn't get it all back.
Gosh.
And little things like that happening. They had that on the radio, so other people were calling in, and there was a guy who lived in Butler County. He didn't know it at the time. His daughter was doing heroin, so they busted his house, and they seized like $60,000 worth of firearms. And he finally got a court order to get them back. And he went, and they had sold them.
Oh, wow.
For like a couple thousand. So,
man,
this Supreme Court case will affect these kinds of things.
It will give people maybe the opportunity to seek
justice.
Relief.
Yeah.
Just so it might not stop the habits initially, but people can use this decision to cite lawsuits against the localities after the fact,
right?
For reimbursement, remuneration,
right?
For basically restitution.
I think in this specific case, a guy had like an SUV, and the crime he had been charged with and convicted of was like selling like $200 or $300 worth of heroin, and they had taken his SUV. It was like it was an expensive car, almost brand new, and they took it, and so he won. And I don't know what that means for him, but I think it's a pretty good thing.
Okay. So they ruled that the Eighth Amendment applies to state and local governments. I'm reading the words of it. It simply says, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. It doesn't even give, it's not like the First Amendment that says Congress shall make no law, which the wording of the amendment itself limits its scope to Congress, even though various Supreme Court decisions have broadened its scope, in ways that are inappropriate. This one doesn't have a limited scope. Why would anybody have ever thought that this doesn't apply to local governments?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they were just doing their thing no matter what, and you're dealing with criminals who were more worried about probably staying out of trouble instead of protecting their property. Maybe that's just always been the case.
Yeah. Okay, well that is big. Unanimous too, huh?
Yeah. That's good.
Well, good.
We got Putin, I don't know, puffing his chest or whatever. He said he's ready for a Cuban Missile-style crisis. because we were putting missiles in Europe.
Oh,
whatever, dude.
He wants to
Whatever.
He wants to play the role of JFK.
Yeah, I guess. Hey,
no,
you know
I don't
what?
think that's gonna work.
Obama's not running things anymore, and neither is Hillary. So
no. I don't
whatever.
think he's gonna face down Trump.
No. So we got that Jussie Smollett thing, the false hate crime report. I just don't care about that. You know, the thing is, though, he's not a kid. You know how old he is?
He's not.
He's like 37.
Yeah.
But we all keep calling him kid. I keep calling him a kid. But he's not. Oh, well. That lady from Alabama who joined ISIS, I think, she wanted to get back in the U.S. and we won't let her.
Oh, that
Hoda Muthana or something like that. I don't know.
Yep. She.
That's good.
Why should they let her?
Right. No way. You go live in your Islamic state.
Yep.
See how much you like it there.
Yep. And you know what? If you're really repentant, renounce Islam and report back the reality of living there. Spend your time there and report back and tell people what it's really like. That's how you can make up for,
Yeah. So this, let's see, we've discovered a new species of tyrannosaur. I don't think we have pictures of it yet. I don't think somewhere in Utah they found it. It's not a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's another kind of tyrannosaur. And I guess
I wonder how they could know.
I guess because it's not a Rex.
Well, I know, but I didn't think Tyrannosaurus Rex was like a genus and a species. I thought it was just
me too.
There's this
because
big kind
I
of
didn't know there were
dinosaur
other kinds.
call them all Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That tells me that it is a specific species, and they've discovered another kind, and it'll be interesting to see what those are. Unless it's going to end up like the Brontosaurus.
What do you mean end up like?
It's a fake.
What do you mean,
there's no Brontosaurus. Right.
So what's it? They're all just brachiosaurs?
I guess so. But there is no Brontosaurus. That was my favorite,
I never knew
too.
that. When did you find that out?
A couple years ago.
All right. I got to go read my dinosaur stuff. It's been a long time since I've read anything about dinosaurs. I used to know everything about them. Apparently everything I knew was wrong.
You thought you knew a lot about them. The second brain in the back, remember that?
Yeah.
They had a walnut-sized brain. And They had to have a second
one to help control that half of their body or something.
They were so big.
Yeah.
So we've got Japan's sent a space probe out, and they have successfully landed on an asteroid.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if they're bringing the probe back or if it's just going to sit there and
data,
take
stuff like that.
I guess we'll find out.
Wow. Well, looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Let's see. R. Kelly is a musician, he's kind of a rapper, but he's R&B. He was arrested. Raping a minor. And I guess
is that what it was?
He's got some other stuff going on too. So I don't know. I only know one song that he did, and that was the Ignition remix, which I like. But I guess he's not going to be making music much more. So
yeah,
there's that. That's all I got.
Okay. Well,
got anything from the land of nonsense?
The land of nonsense. Okay, do you know what a do-rag is?
Do-rag, rag. No, I don't.
Yeah, do-rag, rag, do-rag, rag. Yeah. No, Billy used to wear them. They're those kind of headband things that they... Think of a neckerchief, except it's worn like over the head.
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah,
there's a in
I
Pasadena.
I have some tie-dye ones.
Oh, okay. Well, then you need to not sell them in Pasadena, California.
Right.
A dress code there bans do-rags at the school, John Muir High School in Pasadena, California. Okay, all right, whatever.
For a gang thing, maybe?
Who knows why they did, but it makes sense to me, okay? You know, everybody looks somewhat uniform in a school. Let's have a dress code.
Yeah.
Don't need people wearing these do-rags and whatever. So a group of black kids are protesting it and staging walkouts because they're saying the dress code criminalizes, this is the quote, black young men. So this is from Chris Lindahl, Reggie Miles of the Black Student Union. Quote, the main reason we're protesting today is because we're trying to stop the criminalization of black men on campus. So apparently, wearing one of these do-rags is part of what it means to be black. If they don't have the do-rag on, they're no longer black. And in order to be black, they have to put the do-rag on. But the do-rag's out of regs for the dress code, so it's criminal to be a black young man. That must be their logic. I can't think of any other logic.
So if I wore a tie-dye do-rag, I'd be like a poser.
You'd be like a poser.
Yeah.
And if your black friend did not wear a do-rag, he wouldn't really be black.
He would be a poser.
He would be a poser, a white poser instead of a black guy. So the only way to be truly, authentically black is to wear a do-rag. Apparently, according to Reggie Miles, the Black Student Union at John Muir High School in Pasadena, California. All right, stuff you did not know before.
But, you know, they're high school kids. I don't care what the cause was. If they said we're going to do a walkout or a protest, I'm all in. In high school, it's like,
yeah, that's right. It
doesn't
was
matter
like that,
what
right?
you're protesting.
Yeah,
we're protesting book bags, and okay, yeah, I'm in. Yeah, let's walk out. Let's not do school today. Especially
at Hughes, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, anywhere. But I think that's really,
right.
You know, it's kind of stupid that that anyone would give it any attention. But
well, it's like okay, we're going to stage our monthly walkout. What's the reason this month?
Yeah.
Okay, so in North Carolina, you know how everybody's been going wonky over, statues and stuff. You have a statue of somebody who's, whose wife was the cousin of a guy who,
Robert E. Lee.
was once mean to a black man. Let's tear the statue down, whatever. So, Robert E. Lee in the South, big thing. So in North Carolina, these people set fire to a statue honoring U.S. Army Major General William C. Lee, who commanded the 101st Airborne Division Screaming Eagles during World War II. He was doused with liquid and set fire at a museum. Apparently his sin was having the same last name as General Robert E. Lee.
I think...
Now, it didn't really do much to the statue. It's a stone statue. They just threw some flammable liquid and lit it. But it's like, okay, these kinds of
nuts.
protests, these kinds of movements are good for something. They at least show you, where the brain power of the country does not reside.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yeah.
All right. So that's something. And then last one, just kind of creepy but weird. Guy in South Carolina came home from work one day, and he found a woman and 2 children in his home. The woman was wearing the guy's wife's clothes, and they had used the bathtub. The furniture had been rearranged. That she had been smoking in his house. I guess he's not a smoker. The kids had made themselves at home. One of them didn't even have any pants on. She swore up and down that she lived there. When the guy called the cops, when the cops came, she answered the door and said, "Can I help you?"
Did she know him at all?
No, complete stranger. She was arrested and taken to a hospital for evaluation and examination. The children were put in child care, protective custody services and stuff.
That's really weird.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. I mean, I don't know.
I can't imagine that. What would you do if you came home and
there's just someone in your house?
Terry was still at work, but there's this woman there. What if she's
wearing
better
her
looking
clothes
than your wife?
Mm-hmm. It's like, who are you?
What if she was like younger and stuff? I don't know. Maybe she thought he'd go for it.
I don't know, but she had 2 kids too.
Yeah, so
it's like this guy, probably wasn't ready to be a dad. It doesn't say that he had any children of his own.
Wife.
Yeah. I don't know. He looks like a young kid himself, so he was probably very unprepared for the situation.
That would scare the daylights out of me.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't even know what to do. I would think, am I going nuts? I think I was married to someone else.
Did I wake up? Did I just wake up from the Matrix or something? Or is this like a...
That's a red pill moment there.
A red pill moment? Or no, I'm thinking of the Philip K. Dick story, with the guy, his family, that Keanu Reeves was in it, the cartoonized one.
Oh, Scanner Darkly.
Scanner Darkly, that's right. I would feel like was it that kind of a moment,
Yeah. Who am I? But okay, here's the thing. I would have been so scared that I was going nuts, I would have waited till my real wife got home to deal with it. Because I wouldn't have wanted to deal with that. But I know Vicky would have started kicking some ass.
But the thing is, then she gets to ask you, why were you just letting this go?
I thought it was you, I swear.
I couldn't tell. Okay, that's all I got.
Okay, you know what? I did get an email from someone. Wanted to know something. Teresa from Ohio.
Oh, okay.
She had thought she had heard that you should try to take communion. Hold on, let me turn this off. You should try to take communion under both species, the bread and wine. Otherwise, it's like rejecting part of Christ.
She had heard that. Okay, or she thought she heard it. Okay, so first of all, a few things. Teresa, you should not take communion ever. You should only receive communion. All right, that's a nitpicky thing, but in fact, we should understand that...
She may have said receive. I didn't read it. I was just...
well, all right. But that's a pet peeve with mine when people talk about taking communion. No, you don't take communion. You receive it. Yeah. Anyway, so now there is an actual document. I don't know if it's from the Council of Trent or if it's from Pope Pius V directly, but It's a document of the church that deals with the question of receiving only under the form of bread. And it explicitly says if anybody says that it is not fully beneficial to receive communion in the form of bread alone, and I forget exactly the wording they use there, but basically saying, hey, if anybody tries to say that communion is not fully received and fully expeditious when received under the form of bread alone, then he's wrong. Let him be anathema, and all that kind of stuff. Basically,
right.
We completely reject the idea that you have to receive under both kinds. And the theology behind this is that while it's necessary for the priest to receive as the celebrant of Mass under both the form of bread and the form of wine, the separate consecration of the bread and the wine as this is my body and this is my blood creates a symbolic state of death. So it symbolizes the state of death of Christ on the cross, the separation of the body and blood. The body's here, the blood's here, and when the body and blood are separate, you have death. And so that symbolizes death, and then the priest's reception of both the bread and the wine together reunites them inside the body of the priest, who's also acting in the person of Christ, representing the resurrection of Christ as well. Now, that's symbolically. The reality of the Holy Eucharist is such that the bread entirely all by itself and the wine entirely all by itself, each one and any piece, particle, or fragment of either one after consecration is the entirety of the person of Jesus, his full human person, body, blood, and soul, or his full human nature, body, blood, and soul, and his divine nature, divinity, two natures in one person, completely there, received in either form. Now, the rule of the church, and I could maybe do some research on the theology of why this is a rule, but the rule of the church is that you're not allowed to receive just from the cup, ignoring the body, but you are allowed to receive the form of bread and ignore the cup. I think that's a rule of discipline, not a rule having to do with the theology of what the Eucharist is or the real presence or anything like that. But both the theology of the real presence and this statement from either the Council of Trent or I think Pope Pius V, one or the other, makes it very clear that absolutely it's completely appropriate to receive just from the form of bread, and there's no reason to feel like there's some kind of requirement to receive under both species in order to fully have received communion. So I hope that answers your question, Teresa.
I think that it reminds me of an argument that you and I and a Baptist were having about his claim was that you could receive Christ spiritually and not physically in the Eucharist. And you had pointed out to him that the body, the blood, and the soul and the divinity of Christ cannot be separate things. You cannot receive Christ spiritually and not receive him physically, because they are all the same in one.
It doesn't make sense to you can receive his grace. You can receive the grace of God and the grace that Christ won for you on the cross into your soul, like we do in the sacrament of confession. But right. To fully unite with him spiritually, we also have to unite with him bodily, because Christ is risen and his spirit is not separate from his body anymore.
Nor his blood from his body.
Nor his blood from his body, exactly. Right. Yeah, good point.
All right. I think that's it. We got
Okay, wow.
2
That was
hours.
a long
It was
one.
a long
I
one.
know.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Hope,
no more
hope everybody
skipping.
has stayed with us. Oh gosh, I know.
No more cruises.
Well, you know what? It wasn't the cruise. It was my wife's sickness after the cruise that
all
really
right.
put the kibosh. I mean, and I understand that. Okay, go get in bed and I'll leave you alone. But it wasn't like that because she had been coughing so much, her throat was raw, and it's like every 15 minutes I have to bring her a popsicle. And I'm not going to make her go all the way downstairs into the garage for the popsicles. So, anyway.
Okay. Well, next week, hopefully, nothing will happen, and we'll record next week, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
So, thanks
see
for
everybody.
listening to a podcast
Circle the
about Catholic
beads.
things. Oh yeah, circle the beads. Jason
All
and I
right.
mentioned that. I put it on the website too. Circle the
Okay,
beads.
good. Absolutely.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
We'll see you next.